Hello again, everybody. This is a basic redo. It's going to be a bit longer than the previous videos that I posted on Facebook, but since I've had a request of them being posted on YouTube so they're more easily watchable, apparently a few people have had difficulty watching what's on YouTube. I have no idea what the problem is, but it exists. So here we go. This is starting over at the beginning. That was something I didn't want to do because I'd already done it, but this may be the better way. So first off, I'm going to start off with the two items that or materials that I normally use for building, and that is ABS and styrene. When I first started building molds and models and things like that, I didn't have anybody to show me what to do. It just was trial and error. I started using styrene because that's what I was familiar with. With plastic models that you buy in the store, model airplanes, model cars, all of those things, Revell, Tamiya, those are all made with basic styrene. It's easily cuttable, easily formable. It's the cheapest thing to shove into an injection mold, and it's basically cheap. But it does have its limitations. They used to make the old for sale signs that you'd see hanging on signs out in front of houses and things out of styrene. Over time, you could see the yellowing, and if you picked one up after it'd been out there a while, you could bend it, and it would just snap instead of bending. Fresh styrene, like this, will bend just like ABS. Those old signs, they were much thinner than this. You just bend it and snap right in half, and that was a problem. But they weren't something that was supposed to exist long-term anyway, so you paid for them, and then you tossed them away, so it wasn't a big deal. I use ABS simply because the butane and the acetyl in it, I'm not sure if that's exactly the correct way of pronouncing that, make it more durable. It maintains its high impact much longer. And I found that I've learned over the years it's nearly as easy to work with. Now, I'm going to show you a few things here that I've built and the reasons why I built them in the past and the reasons why I don't anymore, as far as based on size. These two parts right here are styrene shells. This is for an SD45. This is for a GP38-2. As you can see, if you look at the inside, they're made out of styrene. There's white inside, and I've got them painted gray on the outside. These were my masters. I actually made molds of these. The mold for this shell was at least an inch on either side here, and it weighed more than I wanted to lug around. This is a resin copy that came out of that mold. Now, as you can see, this one has a break right here. That's where I had the stem for the resin to be poured in, and then I had little vents that came off of these sides. The resin was poured in the center, ran down in here, poured out these vents, and I knew it was full. When I popped that off, I realized that I had made this section right here too thin because I snapped it off. I had made it thin enough to where I thought it would just pop off. Okay, one of my learning experiences. As you can see, there's a lot of little rivet detail up here on the top. This is a separate casting. This part up front here is a separate casting. As you can see, it's just epoxied on, screwed and glued. But with the exception of just a few air bubbles on the bottom, I got a really nice casting. This is another casting. As you can see, I've got other parts on it. I've got handrails insert into grab irons, inserted into the resin. The problem is over time, this shell has kind of got a concave right there all along the side. Not drastic right now, but on a couple of the other models that I've got finished, over time the resin has done that. And so I don't build my large parts out of resin anymore. I find that I can satisfactorily do it myself by hand out of ABS plastic. What I do continue to do is the detail parts. And I make my models as simple as possible, which means that I don't add a whole bunch of details to a single part and then try and cast it. I make a number of different molds, cast each one of those, and then glue it together like you would a model from a box, which is the way they do it. Point in case is the Superliner truck. There are 37 different parts on this truck. So that is one of the first things I learned when I started doing this. As I said, this GP38-2 shell was the first one I built, and it's much thinner than the SD45, which is another thing I learned. The thicker you have the shell is important, because this thin shell not only has a tendency to warp more quickly, it's much more difficult to pour, because resin is not water thin. It doesn't flow in and flow straight out. I use two different types of resin. One's a high temperature resin and one's a low temperature resin. Low temperature is not going to do well outside, simply because of what you call the greenhouse effect. Now, if I was to build this E-unit out of all resin, and it had a sealed body with glass in the windows, and this back part was all resin, or this whole thing was resin, when you have this outside, you have to deal with what they call the greenhouse effect. The temperature on the inside of that locomotive can get much higher than on the outside. And with a low melting resin, which is basically your standard resin, if it gets 100 degrees outside, you could get 150 to 200 degrees on the inside of that locomotive at any given time sitting in the sun. And it'll collapse. So my high temperature resin, it's great. It'll do better outside. But it's thicker. So it takes longer to pour through that cavernous mold that I would have used for these. And that's not going to work really well, because it's going to harden before it gets out the top. So I don't use it for that. Detail parts like this dynamic brakes or assembly, which is designed to fit on this modified version of the GP38-2. And you just file it down a little bit, but the point is it works. The SD45, this is the blister, it's separate. It allows me to plug it in, but it's easier to cast because it's smaller. So that's why I didn't make that as an entire unit. Now, what I'm going to show through this, at least in this first installment of this video, is how I come to decide how I'm going to make a mold and some of the steps to get ready to pour it. This is a one-part mold, and that is the base for a model of a gazebo. One of the things I want to do is my wife and I like Christmas villages, and this is part of a Christmas village that I want to build. If you look at it, I paint my parts a color that I'm not normally going to use. So, for example, where are we here? Okay. This is the Superliner truck. These are the masters. I painted them a burgundy red, so I know that when I pick this up, I don't use it in a part that I'm going to use. This is a master. So, as you can see right here, I have masters. They're all painted a color that is not going to be used in something not normally used. And so burgundy is my choice for my master color. All right, now this base is all made out of styrene. I spray painted it the burgundy color so it would be easier to see. When it's cast out of resin, or cold cast porcelain, which is basically resin mixed with porcelain powder, it'll be a solid piece with a piece of felt on the back so it can be set on something. Here are two of the vertical supports with the railings. As you can see, I've got brass pieces sticking out the ends. Those correspond to the holes in the structure on the base. Now, the important thing to understand is that you have to calculate your holes. My little board goes. Uh-oh. Hope I didn't knock it on the floor. That would be unfortunate. There we are. Just covered it up. Okay, what you see here is a piece of this 3/16 inch post with some flat sheet plastic built around the edge. Now what I did was I made myself a jig to make sure all my holes were as close to the same as possible. This has an arrow marked on it. This has arrows marked at the base. Those are the sides that I want to line up. So what I did was I simply inserted that over this piece, used it as a positioning to drill my hole. I then moved that so that the arrow was oriented the same on the other side and drilled into the plastic as far as I wanted to go. Now, one of the things about plastic is it has a tendency to warp. The harder the plastic you use or are working with, the more difficult it is to cut it, shape it, whatever. So resin is no different. It has a tendency to warp. When I cast this in a mold, which will be a two-part mold, so I can get all the openings here in the handrail, these will stick out into the mold, the cavity on both sides. I will lay a brass rod that long down into the mold and pour the resin around it. So I will have metal reinforced plastic or resin. Just like concrete is stronger when you have rebar in it, steel reinforced concrete, I have steel or metal or brass reinforced plastic. It will, one, keep it from warping, and if there is a crack in it, it'll keep it from falling apart. So that's another thing I've learned from experience. And it's one of the reasons why I don't use a pressure pot. Once you put something like that in here, it's going to change the dynamics of what works. So my 1-part mold here is made out of styrene. I use the thickest possible, which is 1/8 of an inch thick for the base and the sides. Now, there was a point not long ago where I thought that I was going to have to just trash this whole thing. And it's one of those things that comes from the problem of warpage. When I first built this, which was a number of years ago, I had built the base and the sides and the base, which was glued onto it so that I could build a mold box. And then I got busy with something else, like normally happens, life, and I set it on a shelf in my old shop. My old shop was not temperature controlled. My old shop was exposed in the summer to extremes of high heat and into the winter of cold. And that's one of the things that your trains will, or models, if you use them outside, have a tendency to be exposed to. When I pulled this out of the shelf, it didn't have the sides on it at the time, it was warped like a bowl. I mean, I'm not this drastically, but the sides were curled up. And when I set it on the table, I could actually rock it back and forth in all directions. So I figured, I'll toss it and start over. But I didn't want to. So I thought of the idea if I screwed it down to this melamine board, it might work. And voila, I was saved. There's still a few little tiny irregularities in there when I put a straight flat edge on there. But for me, I can work with this. So anyway, this video was to get this started. I'm going to go ahead and pour this, and you'll see the results after that, and then I'll go ahead and show you how this is going to be built. Just as a last thing here, I'm going to put those in there. There'll be 2 more over here once I cast these. This is the subframe for the roof. I used this. It's one of the reasons why I have it built the way I do, is so this, with the arrows sticking out, I can put in here, drill through. Therefore, my holes are as close as possible to matching the vertical rails. So there I have the base, the vertical supports, and the subroof. And I've decided I'm not going to try and build the roof until I have this assembled. It'll just make it so much easier for reference purposes. So as you can see, there's a lot that goes into this. You have to be careful of the plastic you use. If you use styrene, you have to make sure that you keep it temperature controlled for longevity purposes. Painting it will definitely help. It's not going to salvage it because UV rays can go right through most paints. Anyway, that is this video for right now. I've showed you a number of different things. This can be used in any application, from model making to jewelry making, arts and crafts, and I will show a number of different techniques for making mold boxes. I tend to be a little more engineer type when I build my mold boxes. I've seen people take old containers, milk jug containers or small plastic containers, and use that for their mold, and that works for them. You can put the piece in the container, pour the resin in over it, cut around the edges so you can open it and pull it out. That's fine for most people. For me, I like my molds to be geometric in shape. They're either round, square, rectangular, or something like that. As you can see, this mold has all these little pins on it that fit together that keep the mold from sliding, so everything lines up. That was a fairly large mold. Here's a little tiny mold with a part in it. It's been in storage for a while, so it's dirty. Yeah, it takes quite a bit of time and effort. I cast resin, I cast concrete. I've got some K-rails around here that I've, let's see, here they are. This is the model of a 12-foot K-rail in 1/32 scale. It has rings. This is designed as one of the more modern ones, which don't have the lift rings in the top. I'm be able to make those as well. It has the indentations for bolting it down into the asphalt or whatever subsurface you want to. And it's made out of real cement. And I cast that in the same type of mold as this was cast in. You just have to know the techniques. I do have some little air bubble holes in here, but if you look at real K-rails, they've got real air bubbles in them. So that as long as they're not too large, these can be nicked and chipped so that you look like you have, you have a car run into it, you want to make a nick out of it. It's the only way to get a real awesome concrete color. So, as I said, I'm going to try to make some more videos based on this. From this point on. But I can't guarantee how fast they're going to come out, simply because my work schedule and everything around it just doesn't allow me to do this type of thing when, everybody would like one of these once a week, I'm assuming, but it's just probably not going to happen that way. If it does, great. If it doesn't, then I'm sure maybe there's somebody else out there who can do that. But good luck finding them, because that's why I started this, because I couldn't. So, if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section, and that's all I'm going to do for now, so have a great evening.